Okay, so I would now like to introduce our first featured reader today, Theo Czuk. I've known Theo for quite some time now. We first met at the Art in the Vineyard book selling event that I just told you about some years ago. And Theo and I both have musical influences in our writing, and we've shared some fun performance events. He interviewed me in 2017 on his cable television show, The Many Hats of Cocoa. His newest book, The Black Bottom, and simultaneous CD release under the same title reveal the many facets of jazz music through the years, and it is a fascinating accomplishment. I hope he'll tell you more about it today. I'm sure he will. I love the way he interweaves his music and writing. And I have asked all my featured readers to provide me with their own short bio. And this is what Theo said to me. Theo Czuk has served time as a counselor, a canoe guide, a social worker, a sculptor, a teacher, a pauper, a poet, a pawn, and a king. Well, not so much the king. Born and bred on the hardscrabble streets of Detroit, Theo left home at 17, riding his thumb from sea to shining sea to see what he could see. He served time in the cityscapes of New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco before landing on the green province of Oregon. The personification of a storyteller, Theo explores life, love, and loss through literature, poetry, and songwriting, as well as in live performances. Theo's first novel, Heart Scarred, won the Laramie Award for Best Literary Western before turning his attention to writing his upcoming novel noir psychological thriller, The Black Bottom. As a musician, you may find Theo performing about town as a solo, as a duo, or with his trio, Theo's Trio. For more on Theo, please visit his website, www.tedczuk.com. So with no further ado, please welcome Theo Czuk.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for coming. And open this guy up. The book and the CD. The book is
Mike. Please.
Okay. Thank you. So the book is about where jazz came from. It's about the Roaring '20s and when jazz was in its infancy. And I'll read from the back of the book. The CD is Jazz Today: How Far It's Gone. And I wrote them symbiotically, which was kind of fun. I guess I will adjust this a little. Are we good here?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm going to do, this is the book, and I just want to tell you where the title came from. And by doing that, on the back of the book, it's about the Black Bottom, and I'll just read this a little bit. First, though, I want to thank Stephen and Charles for putting this together. This is a lot of work, and I hope you appreciate the work that they do for these monthly poetry gatherings. And thanks, Barnes Noble, for the space. And a pleasure to present here in front of so many of my verse colleagues. So I mentioned that this was written symbiotically, where jazz came from, and how far jazz has come. Now on the back, I give a little idea where the title came from. And this is written on the back. The Black Bottom was a neighborhood that served as ground zero for Detroit's contribution to jazz. Every major industrial city had them, the speakeasies, the blind pigs, the honky-tonks, that were the testing grounds and launching pad of America's greatest of art form, jazz. This was jazz in its adolescence, the raw, untamed, devil-may-care youth of jazz. The title, The Black Bottom, harkens back to an earlier time in Detroit's history when the city was an agricultural community and this low basin was legendary for its rich black soil. There is poetic beauty to this area, transitioning from the cultivation of agriculture to the cultivation of music culture. Today, the neighborhood of the Black Bottom is buried under thousands of tons of I-375 freeway. But the voices of the people entombed there and the music they generated call out from beneath the stone. The Black Bottom, the measure of man, is what they have to say. One little thing, that was about where the name Black Bottom came from. And then about the novel, Black Bottom, The Measure of Man is a novel noir psychological thriller set in the roar of a 1927 Detroit. Caleb, our protagonist, narration unfolds of a young man who is at once an owner of an underground speakeasy, a Purple Gang affiliate, and a piano player in the seedier speakeasies of Detroit. He has amnesia. Caleb will need to recover his history quickly if he is to have any hope of avoiding his demise. Jazz, amnesia, the Roaring Twenties, Prohibition, gang wars, union wars, and 1927 Detroit are all explored in the psychological thriller. So it's been a fun, one of the most fun times I have in writing is the research. This has been a wonderful way to research. Before I do a little reading, I just got to have a few pages here to read from the book. And it was a challenge in itself in that I decided to take a character and just develop a character. So I had to find her in different places in the book and kind of put it together to give you an idea of what this is about. But our main character is Caleb Kirka. He has amnesia and he's a jazz pianist. Beethoven Jones is Caleb's bud, his partner. He's a jazz bassist. Nika Nightingale, who I'm going to read a little bit about today, is Caleb's girlfriend. She's a jazz singer in Caleb and Jones' band. The band is Jazz du Jour. Temple Bar Speakeasy and Play Nice is the name of the club. So I'll call it the Temp at times, but the full name is Temple Bar Speakeasy and Play Nice. It's a speakeasy and it's a black and tan. And I don't know if you know what a black and tan is, but in the 20s back then, segregation was the rule. And the black and tans were where people actually came together in clubs, and they had to be underground, and this is where jazz really happened. This is where it was really happening. So those were called black and tans. The band that we'll talk about is Jazz du Jour. It's the Temp's house band. A blow-off, I'm going to have to get a sip of water, but let me just say a blow-off are the after-hours jazz jams where jazz cats cut loose after their day gigs in vaudeville. So vaudeville was for the regular audiences until 11, 12 o'clock at night. And after hours is where the jazz musicians would congregate in speakeasies. And so I have to bring all that up. And we'll also have a visit with Satchmo Armstrong in this little reading. There we go. Now, and then I'll get to the reading. One thing I got to say is it's a lot easier if I have a guitar or piano between me and you. I just wording off the tomato cans is a little easier. So this is a little it's fun, a little different for me though. So meeting Nika. Caleb and Beethoven Jones would tour the outskirts of jazz and find different players and get to jam and get the local flavor. So that's what they're doing now. Caleb Kirka and Beethoven Jones were barely out of their teens, but were already seasoned veterans of the Detroit club scene. 3 sets into the gig, this is meeting Kika. 3 sets into the gig, halfway through the night, the duo of the Jew Boy and the Colored Boy. That's how they talked then. This was the name of their band. The Jew Boy and the Colored Boy were rocking the house. 3 straight up-tempo tunes had the crowd hopping and bopping on the dance floor when it was time to give the feet a rest. Breaking into a mournful ballad, Caleb laid back on the squeeze box into a slow shuffle, and Jones began dragging his bow across the big bass fiddle with a soul that dug deep into his African history. On occasion, a local musician would take the stage with the boys, singing or playing the instrument of their calling. In this manner, the boys would at times find themselves accompanied by banjos and bugles and bagpipes and hurdy-gurdies, all manner of musical mayhem. The boys loved this venture as they would get a taste of the regional musical flavor. Often enough, though, these rural honky-tonks served up amateurs without enough time spent woodshedding their chops. The musicianship in these backcountry honky-tonks was a hit-or-miss proposition sometimes. She was a little girl, Nika was. She was dressed in a flower print rag of a dress with her hair disheveled. She tottered on scuffed heels that lifted her up to a grand height of maybe 5 feet. Maybe. The black curly hair and the slightest knot on the bridge of her nose gave away her Jewish heritage. Her smile was tentative as she took the stage, her nervousness evident. Jones nodded to Caleb, and Caleb looked at the girl with some reservation. Too often, a local singer would join the boys on stage, pumped up on the adoration of their parents' blind belief in the talent of their tone-deaf offspring. Caleb and Jones had become well versed in nursing a pitch-crippled singer through an arrangement. They braced themselves for the worst. Softening their instruments to accommodate the vocals, Caleb found the girl's key, and the boys readied themselves to jump in on the first measure that this pretty young vixen began to falter. But the falter never came. The little girl opened her mouth and belted the blues in a voice that was well acquainted with the blues. She was acquainted with the blues in the first person. Her voice was raspy and warm and wonderful, powerful. Where the hell did she get the power in that little frame? She sang with a vision that could see the greatest depths of the tortured soul. Where the hell did she get that vision? She sang with the authority of a spirit that had been bruised by the worst, and she sang with the character of the survivor. Nika coaxed the life from the tune as she nursed the song's pain in her tender, throaty voice. Caleb and Jones shared pleased, relieved smiles and slipped their accompaniment under this little philosopher of croon. Nika, as part of the band, this is chapters later. That was how they met her. And chapters later, when Nika sang the flat five. To call blues the blues is not a misnomer. The blues offer the beaten, the downtrodden, and the lost some small comfort in the world of hurt. The blues carried a gut bucket of angst, filled to the brim. A pentatonic minor scale with a flat five, that is the blues scale. Scale that is rooted deep in the African continent, deep in the African people. It is in that flat five that you will find the blues voodoo. It is in that flat five where hearts are broken and souls are rounded up and branded, like a flicker of a feeble fire on a dark and starless night. The flat five offers sanctuary against the blackness of the howling and the growling and the furtive shadows. The drugs were surging through Nika's veins now, giving her body a rush and her psyche some bravado. It was this synthetic bravado that brought her to the stage, to the microphone. It was this bravado that allowed access through her voice to her pain, to her minor blues with the flat five. Rich and deep and smoky, her voice was an echo, a sonorous echo that resonated from her personal pain and ricocheted around the collective pains of humankind. Nika's echo was a pain that had an upbringing on a rural dairy farm in Houghton, Michigan, on a dead-end dirt road called Bliss Gate. Hers was a pain that had witnessed her father die, crushed on an overturned Alice Chalmer tractor in a cornfield. It was a pain that beheld her mother remarry Big Joe, a violent drunkard who molested Nika and her younger sisters. Nika's pain was a pain that stood watch at too many beatings suffered by her mother at the hands of Big Joe. It was a pain that at 10 years old suffered through her deflowering under the sweaty and alcoholic stench of Big Joe. It was a pain that at 17 years young took the family shotgun, her biological father's shotgun, and blew a hole in Big Joe's chest the size of the Liberty Bell. Let freedom ring, let freedom ring. Good God Almighty, let freedom ring. Through her dark and cavernous voice, through her flat five voice, Nika championed the ration of the abused, the forgotten, and the disenfranchised. At the microphone, Nika sang for the beatings endured by her mother, and she cried for the rape of her sisters. It was a misery purchased on chastity's loss, and it was a misery that the black and tans knew well. Nika sang in the walls of the temple bar speakeasy and play nice seemed a little wider, the roof a little higher. When Nika sang, the congregation breathed a little deeper, their personal crucifix lightened on their shoulders. Nika's voice was a voice that rang ancestral. Her voice chimed with grief and sorrow and the agony of the common bonds that united the souls of the European serfs and the African slaves. When Nika belted the blues, the heavens cried in angst, and when Nika softly sang of love and hope, hell was humbled. Bottles did not clink and chairs did not scrape the floor when Nika sang flat five. Voices fell silent when Nika sang the blues, when Nika sang the subterranean blues. Let freedom ring, let freedom ring. Good God Almighty, let freedom ring. And then just one last little stanza here. This is Satchmo and Nika's Blow-Off. This is actually out of a chapter by that title. And, well, some of you know who Satchmo is? If you don't, you will by the end of this chapter. The temp was a buzz when word spread that Satchmo would be jamming with the house band. All of the familiar local cats were there with their respective instruments in the hopes of being invited to share their chops with the underground legend that was Satchmo. This would be a blow-off that none would blow off. As for the temp dance floor, It was shoulder to shoulder in sweaty anticipation of unexplored horizons. Jazz du Jour having already played a set, was tuned, warmed, and primed for their jam with Satchmo Armstrong. For this special occasion, Beethoven Jones was wrestling with new catguts on his bass. Leon Barwood was spitting up a new reed on his saxophone, and Nika Nightingale was in the alley, spiking her arm with courage. Once tuned, Satchmo looked out from the stage to the black and tan and brown and yellow faces in the black and tan club, and with a laugh he croaked, "Mama warned me about nights like this." With a smile full of endless teeth, Lois rasped, "Let the revelry begin." At that he began festivities by playing a solo soliloquy of the Calvary's revelry, on his trumpet, leading the charge into the night. As Satchmo's solo call to arms waned, the entire band, on cue, launched into Armstrong's hit song, Heebie-Jeebies. Satchmo got the heebie-jeebies, and Jazz du Jour got the heebie-jeebies, and the Temple Bar Speakeasy and Plain Nice got the heebie-jeebies, and the joint was jumping with heebie-jeebies. Satchmo's world of this newfangled music called jazz was a cornucopia of jazz. Satchmo's trumpet was a horn of plenty. When Satchmo trumpeted jazz, there was beef in the pauper's porridge, and there was light at the end of the tunnel. In Satchmo's aural world of jazz, there were no lonely hearts, no broken bones, and there were no lost souls. In Satchmo's world of jazz, there was a God in heaven. When Satchmo trumpeted, "When the saints go marching in," Gabriel conceded the pulpit. The blow-off was blowing off, and Satchmo was blowing off, and Jazz du Jour had blown off the temp when Nika was invited to the stage. Bound in a hip, clingy, flapper, drop-waist black dress and T-strap 3-inch spikes, Nika Nightingale looked like the exclamation point at the end of a suggestive limerick. The stage itself was a dais in the back corner of the temp, and raised 2 feet over the dance floor. Stage left, near the piano, offered the singular step onto the platform. The longer leg players would often skip the footstep and just stride directly up onto the rostrum. Little Nika always used the step. We're gonna have a local number. Join us for a swing or two," Satchmo announced with his gravel grin. Satchmo was a contracted name of Satchel Mouth, a tribute to his ever-present display of beaming teeth. Sharing the flask with the house, he announced, "Y'all know her as Nika Nightingale." Then he rasped to Nika, "Come on up here, baby, and give us a throw." Nika was fresh from the alleyway, and the heroin was surging a warm rush through her veins. She made the footstep okay, but the step up onto the stage reached out and grabbed her foot, and she stumbled headlong toward the platform floor. She would have made it, too, if August Pinney had not swung around on the piano bench and caught her mid-fall. The speakeasy went silent as Nika righted herself and twitched the angles of her dress onto her curves. Only the heroin swamping her veins mitigated her embarrassment. Quick to recover, Satchmo put the house at ease, smiling with a satchel full of teeth. "The little lady's ready to explode with a drone," and the patrons laughed. And then to Nika he added, "Come on over here, little one. Let's me and you fill up us a decanter of jazzum." The band was full tilt in 2 measures. Louis Armstrong was center stage of the cacophony, beaming full and toothy. Nika Nightingale was on her best game. She was in the moment. She was in the place one gets in meditation and in prayer. Nika was universal, and she was of the singular moment. She was singing the full history of mankind. Nika was chanting the first ever ancestral words around a dank campfire, and she was crooning the future chronicles of humankind's prospect. Nika was singing on high. On high. Nika Nightingale sang from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows, letting her voice channel the full breadth of the pain and the ecstasy of the human experience. When Nika sang on high, it was pure like the first snow and real like a grandmother's fable. And it had the energy that tapped the shoulder of angels and cooed sweet nothings into their wings. And the colored girls standing stage sight felt missed for their fellow gender trekker and said things like, "Jesus himself are gonna snatch that girl aloft," and "Give that child air for she spark." And every voice in the Temple Bar, Speakeasy, and Plain Nice rejoiced the rapture and joined in the ecstasy. And when Nika sang on the lowdown, The pain and the agony oozed from the melody with a pitchfork and a hammer, and the cries rang so deep that memory dug down to the dawn of man, and Eve was thrown from the garden to bear the monthly blood cycle with babies at her feet and wolves at the door, and the misted colored girls cried, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." And Nika's voice was one with the moon and sister to the shadows. When Satchmo jumped into Nika's movement, into Nika's deliverance, he lifted her high on the wings of his golden trumpet, and her voice was delivered naked like honesty and pure like the child of Joseph and Mary to the salvation that waited on the banks of the Jordan River. The revelers cried in their joy and they wept in their sorrow, and every soul in the temple bar, speakeasy, and play nice filled with the wisdom of the Holy Sacrament. Prayers were offered and answered in the same breath in Nika's and Satchmo's blow-off. This was a blow-off for the ages. This was a blow-off of every forebear spirits of their plight and their rapture that had ever tread the rich soil of the Black Bottom and beyond. Jazz de jour, with Nika leading the charge and Satchmo trumpeting the cause, stepped outside of the contrivance of human time and became one with the cosmos, one with the universe, and one with the heavens. One. So there's so much in that book, and to just take out a couple little scenes of one character was a challenge, but a very interesting challenge. I was glad I had the opportunity, so thank Stephen and Charles again for this opportunity. What I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to read. So I'm a songwriter, and my songs tend to be pretty poetic. I also am a poet. I have a couple of little chapbooks of poetry out. But I'm going to read one of my songs, the lyrics of the song, to finish this up. And I've read it here before. It's called Pull Me From the Rubble. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to read this as a poem now. When I come back and I'm allotted my 5 minutes at the end, I'm going to play the song. So right now, I'll just read it as a poem. If I may. Pull me from the rubble. 1. Sometimes I don't know you, we're strangers when we kiss. We both want something different, but we're settling for this, vulnerable. Like lame game on the open plain, like babies in the jungle. Come on, pull me from the rubble. 2. I just can't believe this loneliness we share. We're lonely when we're on our own, and we're lonely as a pair. And lonely is as lonely does. It's like living in a bubble. Come on, pull me from the rubble. Bridge. And waking is the hardest part to do. You know it's true. When someone you don't love lies next to you. 3. Believing astrological myths, we've been blinded by the prayer. The laughs are superficial and the tears are just hot air. There's no blame and there's no shame. Don't even take the trouble. Come on, pull me from the rubble. I'm to my neck in this emptiness, so bring along your shovel. Come on, pull me from the rubble. Pull me from the rubble. So I'll play that song later. That's it for me.
All right, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Theo. Let's give Theo Czuk another hand.